Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mandy Goodman, and I am the Women's Law Students Association's second vice president. We want to welcome you all to the 37th Annual Edith House Lecture. We're very excited that you're all here, and we have a wonderful speaker, Miss Audrey Tillman, who's going to be speaking kind of just about her life and career at Aflac. And we wanted to start off before Haley introduces Miss Tillman. I wanted to give you just a brief background, a little bit about the Edith House Lecture and how it all got started here at Georgia. So Miss Edith House was the co-valedictorian of the 1925 UGA law class, and she was also one of the first two women to graduate from the law school. After she received her JD, she spent 4 years practicing law in Florida and then was appointed as the assistant U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida. She worked in that position for about over 30 years and then retired in 1963. And we'll also host this lecture mostly just to honor her and her pioneering spirit and want to continue this tradition throughout the years to come. And I'm going to turn it over to Haley now to introduce our speaker.
Good afternoon. My name is Haley Nikolic, and I'm the Vice President of WILSA and the Edith House Coordinator this year. First of all, I want to thank everybody for being here today. We are so excited to have Audrey Boone Tillman here for the 37th Annual Edith House Lecture Series. I can't imagine a more perfect individual to represent what the Edith House Lecture Series stands for. Throughout her career, Ms. Tillman has been fearless, driven, and committed to excellence, and as a result, she has proven herself an incredible example to young women in the law. Ms. Tillman is a proud graduate of the University of Georgia School of Law. After receiving her Juris Doctor here, Ms. Tillman served as a federal judicial law clerk for the U.S. District Court for North Carolina. Prior to her career at Aflac, where she currently holds the position of Executive Vice President and General Counsel, Ms. Tillman was an associate professor at North Carolina Central University School of Law, as well as an associate at Smith, Helms, Mullis, and Moore in Greensboro, North Carolina. Ms. Tillman started at Aflac Incorporated in the legal department in 1996. She was quickly promoted to second vice president in 1997 and vice president in 2000. Ms. Tillman was then appointed Senior Vice President of Human Resources at Aflac in 2001, and in 2008 was promoted to Executive Vice President of Corporate Services, where she has been since. Ms. Tillman's success has been recognized on numerous occasions. In 2016, the National Law Journal named her one of 50 outstanding general counsel. She received the Diamond Award, which is the highest honor awarded by the Corporate Counsel Women of Color Association. Recently, in 2017, Ms. Tillman received the Distinguished Service Scroll from our law school's Alumni Association. Also in 2017, she received the Rosa Parks Woman of Courage Award. Last year, she was chosen as one of 2018's Women Worth Watching. It has been a great pleasure to get to know Ms. Tillman, and I know you will all greatly benefit from hearing her story. And with that, please help me in welcoming Ms. Audrey Boone Tillman.
Thank you. I don't know if I'll stand back here. It's so intimidating. May it please the court. I may walk around, if that's okay, because this is more of a conversation. Can everybody hear me? Okay, perfect. Thank you for having me. I was really just honored and blown away to be invited to be the lecturer, because I remember sitting here for the Edith House Lecture. And it was always a big deal, and we'd have a big deal person to come. So it took me a minute to just kind of absorb that. And I'm very grateful and very humbled. I got so much from this law school, so very much. I mean, it's an absolute fundamental part of my maturation as a person and as a lawyer, as a woman. So I'm forever grateful, and it's not much that Dean Rutledge would call me for that I would say no to. So I am very pleased to be here. And I love the subject. I love the subject that they wanted me to talk about, my rising through the ranks as a woman of color, because it's an experience. It really is. But what I wanted to do, at least briefly, is to kind of talk about how I got here. Because every single experience that's happened to me is a part of my success where I stand today. So I have to start back in Southwest Atlanta, where I was born and raised. That's real Atlanta, like inside the perimeter, like for real Atlanta. And in Atlanta, when I was growing up and going to school in the 70s, we didn't have busing in Atlanta. So you went to school in your neighborhood. And so I went to school in my neighborhood, and my teachers, my principal, my classmates, we all went to the same school. We rode our bikes or we walked. My church was in my neighborhood. We rode our bikes to church. Everything was right there in a neighborhood called Cascade Heights in Southwest Atlanta. And with that came a really exclusively African American experience. K through 12. I did not attend school with anyone other than African Americans. That's unheard of today, but it was reality for me. It was normal and it was fantastic, and you had this beautiful little ecosystem where everybody loved you and was cheering for you and would not hesitate to put you in check at any moment. And that was my experience. So I'm going to school and doing well, and actually I didn't know until I began to study the law that it was not constitutional to have prayer or corporate punishment in public school. Because at Westmatter Elementary School, every day we prayed over the loudspeaker as part of the announcements, and every day somebody got a beating at school. Every day. You were just glad when it was not you. But it was order, and it was beautiful. And when it was time to get ready to leave and go to college, I was very interested in going to Spelman. I have a lot of family and people that I really admire that went to Spelman, which is a HBCU in Atlanta, a fantastic school. And my father told me, "You will not go to Spelman. You have been in an HBCU for 12 years. And you will go out and you will find a school and be immersed in the real world." So I ended up going to UNC Chapel Hill, where I went and applied there, took the tour, and it was one of those, this is where I'm supposed to be. And if I get in, this is where I will go. And I did, and I went there, and it was fantastic. But as fate would have it, I wasn't in on the whisperings of what people do on the inside of campus. There's always like the story, and then there's the side story. I wasn't in on the side story. So when it came time to choose where I would live, I went by the catalog. I was looking for air conditioning. That's what I was going for. And I didn't know that most of the students of color end up on a certain part of campus that I was on the opposite side of. So I come from my experience, where I had been and how I grew up, to a university of 30,000 people, of which I knew not one, and on the side of campus where there was nobody that looked anything like me. So at 18, I'm like, okay, well, here we go. And I was in a room, a triple, with two women that, if I was writing a sitcom, I could not write us to be more different from each other, the three of us. Just so different. My first roommate, Ruthie, who I love these women today. They are in my circle. From Charlotte, very, very wealthy family, very wealthy. She was very preppy. That was a big 80s thing, very preppy. And she told me, she said, "Audrey, I've never had a conversation with a person of color in my life other than our housekeeper." At 18, in Charlotte. I'm like, Charlotte? Really? Okay, that's interesting, but okay. And then I had another roommate, Betsy, who was from a very, very poor county in North Carolina. Her dad was a civil rights lawyer. They were both Caucasian, but her experience in that very poor county, in that public high school with her dad, who was a civil rights lawyer, and a wonderful, beautiful man, was entirely different from Ruthie's, which was entirely different from mine. And in that room, we learned how to live together. Like, we learned that differences can make us stronger and better together. And they are, to this day, in my inner circle, All three of us dated, the guys we dated in college, we married them, still married. All three of them are doctors, and the three of us have done pretty well for ourselves. But we made that happen at UNC, getting out of our comfort zone. And so my subtitle to the remarks today are, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because that's kind of the story of my life, and it started as early as that. So I went to UNC, loved it, but you had the opportunity to kind of pick your own space, pick your own friends and stand in your own space and choose your own major and all that. So I did end up in a really comfortable place, but I got to law school interest because one of my professors, so I'm the kind, if I like you, I take all your classes, especially if I'm doing well. Sign me up, I'm there. If I'm not, you'll never see me if I ever get out. But he said, you ask questions. You're interested in this material, not just checking the box. Have you ever thought of law school? No, but I will. I'm like, what do I need to do? So he said, you got to take the LSAT. So I started looking at the LSAT, but at that time, God knows how much it costs now, but it was $800 to take LSAT prep, which in 1986 might as well have been $5,000. I knew I couldn't ask my dad for that much money on a humbug, so I'm like, I'm walking in there cold. I'm just going to take it, see how it goes. If I do well enough, then I'll ask him for the money. And I took it one time and did well. I'm like, this might be for me. I might do this. So I started applying to law schools and didn't know a single thing about law school. Not one single thing. Nobody in my family had been to law school. My family is educated and in lots of professional positions, but no lawyer. So I'm just winging it. I'm winging it through the application process. And I start hearing from schools and heard from Georgia, and I got in Georgia. And then this student who was in school named Greg Roseborough called me on my landline in Chapel Hill. Like, I'm standing at the wall. Hello? That's what it was like. So Greg called me. He's like, hey, I'm a student at University of Georgia, and Georgia has this, and Georgia has that. And by the way, I'm from Durham. So where do you live? Because I know so-and-so that, Greg, he was always that. He was always that, even back then. So what really brought me to Georgia, and it wasn't the financial piece, it was we care enough about you to offer you this, was a scholarship. It was called the Founders Scholarship then. But that was the thing that turned my eye towards the University of Georgia School of Law. And that is why, to this day, I have always given, and I continue to give, to the University of Georgia Fund, because there are people like me coming behind me that will make the difference between them going to UVA or Georgia Tech or Emory, God forbid. But that did it for me. So it's important to me personally that I always give back and continue to give back for that next little Audrey Boone who's coming through, who could benefit from that. So that's my plug for the law school fund. It's very important. So get to law school after my very comfy existence that I've made at UNC, and I get here and land here, and boy, there is nothing comfortable about law school. I had lunch with Haley and the other officers from the Women's Law Students Association. So I'm glad to hear it's not the complete stress factor that it was when I was coming through. It's still stressful, but it was a very competitive and kind of harsh dynamic. And you had to make some alliances, and I mean quickly, you would not make it. It was a weeder outer, like you gonna make it or you're not. And I learned very quickly, I thank God for the Black Law Students Association. That was an automatic, okay, all right, we got each other. But I also learned, let me get in here and make some other alliances. So the people that had gone to UNC, I'm like, okay, here we go, let's go. And one of my study friends who went to UNC with me ended up being number 1 in our class. So I'm like, okay, Greg, let's go. Let's go. What are we going to do next? I mean, you just had to get outside of that. I'm so used to me. I'm so used to studying with me. And for me personally, I've always been kind of reserved, kind of, not that uber competitive person about grades. Obviously, I want to do well, but I'm not that kind of, what did you get? I got a 94, what did you get? But that's what it was like. That's what it was like. I mean, people would literally come to you like, what did you get on the test? And where I come from, that would get you beaten up. Like, you come up, what did I get on the test? Are you kidding me? But that's what it was like. People would be crying. It was just stress. Greg shaking his head. I'm not making it up. I'm not making it up. Mixed in with that were some super cool professors and people who really wanted to, in private, away from the Socratic method of class, want you to succeed. What can I do to help you? But it was a stressful environment, coupled with the fact that, I remember, and I only mention this because it's relevant in recent media, one day walking down to Broad Street, and there's this parade going down the street, and it's this fraternity that I don't even remember the name of it, but it was like people in hoop skirts and Confederate uniforms and the fake guns and all of that, and people in the back in blackface as the slaves in a parade on Broad Street. So I'm coming from Chapel Hill, liberal and progressive and, take to the streets and posters and protesting. And I'm like, what's going on? What's going on here? What's going on? Is this really happening on Broad Street? And it was. And so I've got that in the back of my mind too. Like, I'm in a parallel universe. Here I am, people are asking me what I got on this test, and you got slaves in blackface walking down the street. This is an interesting place. What have I done? But the relationships here that I was forced to make for survival, because I'm not a quitter. Once I'm in here, I'm in here. You might have to drag me out, but I'm a get out. That's always been my perspective. It helped me, again, to see people in a different way and see the study of law, see the University of Georgia in a different way beyond just what you see on the surface. So I left here having done all I could do, to be the best lawyer I could be. Dean Ellington, seeing his poster up there, he was the one. I was not even thinking judicial clerkship. He was the one who called me into his office and said, I think this is something you should go for. I'm like, what is it? And he explained it to me, and I'm like, so I'm not gonna start getting paid from a firm? You're asking me another year to wait? And he's like, it'll be the best thing for you. And I applied. I was very fortunate to receive a clerkship. It was the best thing I've ever done for my practice. Bar none, not even anything close. It was a fantastic experience. And I'll tell this one thing because it's of what not to do, but it'll tell you kind of my haphazard view of study. When I was coming through, you could take the bar your 3rd year while you were in school, which sounds crazy, but everybody did it. So I was studying to take the bar while I was working and going to school, although we really never went to class while we were studying for the bar. But I was the kind of student in my 2nd year, once I was freed from the oppression of 1st-year courses where they select them for you, I took whatever I wanted to. I took from professors I wanted to. I took, esoteric things like, women in the law and entertainment law and rights of the confined and the civil rights movement and things that it nourished me. I needed that nourishment academically. And so things like corporations, tax, all that, I was like, no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do that. So for the bar, I believed that if you pay these people this much money, they will help you know what you need to know for the bar. So there was tax, there was income tax, partnership tax, corporate tax, all these little sections. And I just decided I'm not going to study that. I'm not going to go because I'm not going to understand it. And the time it would take me to understand it, I could use and apply to something that I actually could grasp. That was my thinking. That you following me, that logic? So, plus I had heard, they had told all of us that you will not, they haven't asked a tax question on the bar in like 30 years. So I'm hedging my bets. All right, let's go. I'm gonna know everything else about this and nothing about this. Sitting in the bar, back then it was 6 questions, so I mean you couldn't get a 0. 6 questions. Second question, tax question. Second one, I'm sitting there like, okay, Jesus, it's me and you, it's me and you, me and you. So I think to this day, and I passed, but that 10 minutes when I was going through my mind, like, okay, if I don't miss another thing, if I get a perfect score, like I'm calculating literally what I need to do if I get a 0 on 1 of 6 essay questions. But I think to this day, what I really think, I think that whoever read my essay was just, they thought it was funny, like bless her heart, like she tried. And that plus my estimation that I had to be perfect on everything else, boom, passing score. It can be done. It can be done. Now, don't do that. Don't do that. Go to all the lectures and study all the material. But that was, that was kind of how I approached it. And when I left University of Georgia School of Law, I mean, some of the people that I was just like, oh God, get me away from this guy. There were people that were my friends that I would have paid good money to see beaten up like 3 years before that. And we were friends. Like we learned how to get through this thing together. And some of them to this day, I mean, I keep in contact with, and it was just a positive experience about getting out of your comfort zone. So I left there. I went to practice in a big law firm. At that time, it was the largest law firm in the state of North Carolina. It's now busted up 2 and 3 and 4 times. But at that time, it's about 250 lawyers. I was their first African-American attorney to go to that practice. And suffice it to say, this was in the 90s. A lot of people there, super excited I was there. Very grateful, like it's about time. A lot of people weren't, even in the 90s. A lot of people weren't. So I knew then, okay, I'm here to do the work. Got to do the work with excellence. And one of the most profound memories that I had, because I had gone through the federal clerkship experience, so I knew the federal criminal system. I knew the FBI, I knew the U.S. attorneys, I knew how to walk through and migrate through that system. So probably a month in, there was this gentleman, older guy, he was a white guy, who was an executive with the company at that time. It was called Payne Weber. And he had embezzled millions of dollars. It was turning himself in, white collar crime, pretty typical case. But they asked me, like they don't ask a new associate to do anything, but they asked me because of my experience to walk him through that, because maybe I could go through some back doors and make it less. I mean, this was in the paper. It was a big deal. So I get there to the, it wasn't in the district I was in, it was in another district. Get him there to the office to turn him in at the U.S. Attorney's office. And he's there, probably 60-year-old guy. He's all gray suited and pinstriped, and I'm all blue suited and pinstriped. And I'm, come with me, and I'm going to take you through this. And get there to the office. And back then, they had these glass doors, kind of like the doctor's office, where you slide it, and there you're standing. And so I knock on the door, the lady slides it. And I'm about to ask her what I do with him. And she says, you need to take her around to the back and enter into that door. And here I am with my paying client, and they're telling him to take me in the back. And so for a minute, for a flash, I am from Southwest Atlanta. I am from Southwest Atlanta. So in a flash, I was like, snap, did she just think this? But I got my client here. And thank goodness I had been used to having to overcome circumstances and issues, because I could collect myself, correct her, and get him through this very, the worst experience of his life, being turned in and fingerprinted by the feds. But that was what began the roller coaster of practice as a young woman and woman of color. And I mean, there were several instances where I just was like, wow, what do I have to do? What do I have to do? I mean, I'm a smart person. I've got credentials. What do I have to do? But there were just as many or more of, wow, look at me. I did that. Wow, thank you for your help on that. You just have to get through. You just can't stay in the uncomfortable or the painful. You just have to keep moving and overcoming. And so I left the firm, went to law school, taught there for 2 years. I was very, very fortunate, but literally was called the week before classes to fill a position where there had been a very untimely situation with a faculty member. So I came, I was excited to do it. I was all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, but throughout the entire first semester, I was about 5 pages ahead of the students, and they just didn't know. They just didn't know. But it was a great experience, and I learned a lot about working on a team of people in a closed environment with very type A. You're looking and shaking your head and laughing. It matured me as a professional. It really did, working in the law school faculty, and I loved it, and I could have retired in that role, but then my husband finished school. He was in residency and all that when this was going on. We moved to Columbus, Georgia. By this time, I'm like 30. I'm like, okay, we got to get some things going here in the family area if we're going to get it going. So I'm not gonna work. I'm just gonna focus on like getting settled in and starting our family. And that lasted about 60 days. And my husband was like, you need a job. You need a job. We could put this on the back burner. I can't like come home like this every day. And so anyway, I started at Aflac. And I had heard of Aflac, but this was pre-Duck. So it wasn't it wasn't the household name that it is. It was Aflac. It is an insurer and regional and all that. And then in 2000, the Duck came, and then everything exploded from a brand and market size standpoint. But I started there as a staff attorney. Now, I wasn't right out of law school. I started there as a staff attorney. There was no assistant staff attorney. Like, that was the bottom of the rung. And, in my mind, I've done this and I've done that and I've tried more cases and I've done more than any of these people. But that was the job they had. So that was the job I took. That was what was available. So if I wanted to get in, I had to get in with where it was available. And those years early in my career where I took, the bottom feeding matters and the matters that other people didn't want were the years I had to have because I didn't know the company. I didn't know it. And I'm grateful that when I began to ascend in the company, I did so with a knowledge and an experience that I wouldn't have gotten just coming in off the street. But I will tell you, I worked for my area of specialty was employment law, labor and employment. That's what I always practiced. And I came into Aflac. This is how divine order works. I came into Aflac when Kathleen, at that time Spencer, but now Amos, the woman whose portrait is down there, she was leaving the legal department doing the company's labor and employment work. And she went to start the advertising department, which later became the birth of the Duck. That all started by a UGA grad, Kathleen Amos. And she was so kind and generous to me. I was a staff attorney. So kind and generous to me about, look, you're taking over my things. Let me help you. Watch out for this. Watch out for that. Make sure you always do this. Never do that. For years, to this day, to this very day. So that kinship, that sisterhood with another UGA law grad, I absolutely give that as much credit for my success because it was my start as my own hard work. Because let me tell you right now, how you start is important. It's tough to overcome a bad start, sometimes impossible depending on your environment. But I did the labor and employment law for years. I mean, I just was in that position, staff attorney. And our general counsel, another UGA law grad, Joey Loudermilk, I began to get more and more work with him, more and more exposure to him and to my CEO, Dan Amos, who is the Amos of the business school building right over here, big UGA fan and supporter. I began to have more exposure to them. So then it was not so much who's going to work on this, but let's get Audrey to work on this. And then my work started to speak for me. And then I had more opportunities to work on bigger matters and do things in front of our board and things that when you're in a position of trust, you get to do. So I did that for a while, and I began to ascend in terms of promotion. And then one day, Dan Amos called me into his office, and he said, I want you to leave legal. I want you to leave, and I want you to go and run human resources. When a company like Aflac, if you know anything about our culture, it's everything. Our culture is everything. It's more than the products we produce, because that culture produces the products. So we invest in our culture, and it's critical, and our culture has chewed people up and spat them out because they couldn't withstand the culture. But I got the culture. I really did. And I also got human resources because they were my client. But human resources was jacked up. It was terrible. I didn't even want to go over there. That's how bad it was. And they were my client. But I gave him this long list of why I couldn't do it. And he said, everything you just said is what I want you to fix. So everybody that I trust and love that I wanted to talk me out of it, my parents, my husband, Kathleen, everybody was like, no, I see you doing that. No, that's for you. That's got your name on it. And so I went over to HR, and a big promotion for me, but it was a struggle. Like, I'd never been taught to manage people. My entire legal practice. I went from managing one legal assistant / executive assistant. The next day it was 85 people in a really disgruntled, dysfunctional area who were like, when I came to talk to them. But one thing that I've always done in the experiences of my life, to include the experiences in this hallowed space, is admit what I don't know. I don't know. I gathered them together in a room just like this. And I was like, I don't know what y'all do. I don't know how we produce payroll. I don't know any of that. But I will. Give me a chance. I will study it. I will learn it. And we will figure out how to do this better. And just that, all the air. Everybody took a deep breath, because I wasn't coming trying to sell them a bill of goods about what I knew, and I knew I didn't know anything. So all of my experiences, my entire life about here you are in a place that you don't know nothing about this or these people or any of that, it served me so well as I began to move to the business side of Aflac, because I left, I was VP and counsel for employment law. I left to go be SVP, Senior Vice President of Human Resources. And I had to, for the first time in my tenure with the company, learn what Aflac did. I know that sounds funny, but as lawyers, we don't always know what the business does. You might work for Xerox, but you might not know what Xerox does. You just know the cases that come across your desk. So I had to learn the company, how we make money, what our different divisions are, what makes us successful, what helps us to stand apart from our competitors. I had to learn all that on the job in a fishbowl as the entire corporation looked to see what's she going to be able to do with them over there. And I was so grateful for the team that wanted to work with me and wanted to get better. And, some people didn't make it, had to make some hard decisions. But we ended up with a first-class, put them up against anybody, human resources function. And so the reward you get at a place like Aflac is the better you do, the more you get that's troubled. So I ended up with an area called corporate services that had everything from the company's aviation to for-profit printing companies. I mean, I didn't know anything about for-profit. I didn't take corporations, remember, or tax or anything. I'm like, ROI, what do you mean? Inflators, deflators? I mean, I got an MBA on the job. in 14 years that I was outside of legal. And I learned it, and people were glad to help me, and I was, I did it with the help of some really amazing people who wanted me to succeed and wanted Aflac to succeed. And if you get yourself surrounded by people on the same mission and you have a sense of esprit de corps, if not love for each other, there's nothing you can't do. There's nothing you can't turn around. But those years when I was away from Aflac, from legal, I remember once I was in a meeting with other HR professionals, and Cole Peterson, who was the head of HR for Walmart Corporation, pulled me aside afterwards and he said, Audrey, you got to stop being a lawyer. You got to stop. Because what you say is just laced with all this lawyer stuff. And it kind of brings the conversation to a halt. Has anybody ever told you that? And I was like, no. He's like, well, I'm telling you today. And so I worked so hard in those years to not be the lawyer, even on things that I knew that the person who succeeded me as employment counsel, I knew better than they did, but I'm, okay, thank you for that advice. Thank you, because I'm not the lawyer. That's yours to handle. And I had a ball. I mean, we've got some amazing, dynamic, just, awesome people who work at Aflac, and that is what the success is about. But I loved working with them, and I loved learning from them. And just when I got comfortable, after 14 years, our general counsel, Joey Loudermilk, says, I'm retiring. And I'm retiring in about 6 months. So I'm out of here. And it shocked all of us because he and Dan Amos, our CEO, worked so closely together that I never saw them as not being together. I thought when Dan left, he would leave. But he was like, no, I'm out, for real. So Dan asked me, look, I would like for you to come back to legal and run it. And I had been away for 14 years. And in that 14 years, the entire universe had changed because we have a huge operation in Japan. 75% of our business is in Japan. So what I knew about international law and regulation, you could have put in this little ring right here. I mean, I knew nothing about it. And we had undergone the whole international economic meltdown. So now all the international regulatory agencies were expecting headquarters organization to be on top of all of the international locations and the regulations and the laws and everything that go with that. I knew nothing about that. Thank God I was comfortable with being uncomfortable, because I could have said, no, that's okay. I'm good over here. Things are good. They're working well. I'm comfortable in this space. But I'm the girl that didn't take the tax portion of the Barbary. So I'm like, yeah, let's go. Let's do it. So I assumed the role now 4 years ago as GC, and immediately had to start learning what was going on in our Japan branch. I had been there. We have celebrations, I go to Japan and, the ceremonial. I've never had responsibility for them. That was an education for me at this stage in my career. Like the developmental piece of having to work with, manage, motivate, understand an entirely different culture. Because Japan's culture is completely different than ours. Where they are with women even, wowza. I mean, they are kind of where we were in the 70s in terms of women in the workforce and the environment and the welcoming of them. So you go from Joey Loudermilk, who is an older, very conservative male, to me as the boss, with all that I am bringing every day. And let me tell you, it was rough. It was rough for them, it was rough for me. At this stage in my career, I had to learn how to do that. I had to learn that when you're sitting in a meeting with your Japanese counterparts, and their culture is so beautiful and deferential and kind, and they would dare not say anything that would have any inference that we disagree or that you are wrong, ever. Now, my colleagues in the U.S., not the case. Like, we go there, we go in every day. That's what I'm used to. But I'm sitting and I'm talking and everybody's nodding, hey, 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 well, to me, the head nod is, we're good. We're moving on to something else. To them, it's like, we're just nodding our head. This has nothing to do with agreeing. We're just, we're not being disruptive or rude. And it was, I thought I was going to have to move to Japan. I did, because I didn't feel like I was really infiltrating, that I was really being seen as a leader, taken seriously. I felt like they were tolerating what I was doing and saying because they knew I was leaving on Saturday. That's how I felt. So I asked our CEO, do I need to move? Do I need to go home and talk to Chip and say, we need to go to Japan for a year so that they will know she's here and it's serious? And he said, no, you don't need to move. You do what you're doing, they need to do better. And so I became more serious about the doing better. And I'll tell you, when I love to go to Japan. We're making tremendous inroads with our female workforce in Japan. Tremendous. Like Aflac Japan is killing it in the diversity space. And in Japan, diversity only means women. That's it. But we're doing great with that. But they have had to come along too. I've had to change a lot of the way I do things, but they've had to change too. Because sometimes I give them some Southwest Atlanta when they need it. I do. I give it to them. And it's funny because I can go a week without being in a meeting with a woman. Like I won't even see anybody. The whole time I'm there. They're not at the table where I am. But every now and then somebody is. And when they're in there and I have to, okay, wait a minute. No, that's not true. Wait a minute. That's not my understanding. I need you to fix that, or that you haven't made the progress that you said. So let's talk about that, in the very deferential way. But to them, it's like, and so I'll every now and then I'll catch a glimpse of a female that's in the room when I'm dealing with them, and it's this fantastic mix of horror where they're like, oh my God, she really did that, and yeah, get them, yeah. It's just, you just got to catch them at the right time. But they're evolving. And I'm really proud to be a part of that evolution, because I can say that my sister circle, wherever I have been, if it's in, Chapel Hill or Georgia or the law firm or wherever, that's been such a part of how I have sustained and achieved. And my circle of people of color and like-mindedness and in all the ways we are alike or different has been what's got me through. So I've enjoyed helping them to bond together as women professionals, especially young women, and have them know that, it's a evolution. It's not a revolution, but we are here to make sure that it will happen. So I'm very, very proud of that. And so I'll close my remarks, and then I'd love to take questions if there are any, by just reiterating to the students here, because you're all achievers. You wouldn't be sitting in this courtroom if you were not at the top of your game. I know that. But there will be times, you've probably already experienced some. If you haven't, then keep living. You will. There'll be times that you will be so uncomfortable, despondent, dejected, depressed, anything on the list. You'll be that. And that's okay. Because that is what makes you stronger and better for the next thing that you've done. It's so funny when I talk to younger people at Aflac, because they only know me as Audrey Tillman, EVP and GC. They don't know me as staff attorney or the person who was coming up with these initiatives in HR that were just flaming out left and right. That's part of my story too. I had a lot of things that I wish I could take back and do over and do better. But I got everything I could out of them, and I took them with me to the next thing, which probably soared. But then another flame out, and then another soaring, and then another, oh, I wish I could get this back, and then another, wow, we killed that, didn't we? That's what it looks like. It looks out just like that, and that's okay. Like, don't wither on the vine because it didn't work out. Because things don't work out sometimes, and then they do. But you don't get to when they do if you're dead when they don't. And I love, it's basketball season, I'm a true blue Tar Heel, put Tar Heels as #1 on everybody's chart, let me just say that. But I love this quote by another basketball great, John Wooden, who none of you all probably know unless you're students of basketball, but he was just a mega famous coach for UCLA and a wonderful man. And he said this quote, and it stuck with me, and I always tell it to people. And he said, things work out best for the people who make the best of how things work out. Let me repeat that. Things work out the best for those who make the best of how things work out. And that is truly the story of my life. Because I've had some highs and some, woo, we crushed it. And I've had some, oh man, that was terrible. What are we gonna do? Let's fix it. And it's okay. It's all right, because it's all working together for the good. And as long as you're getting every single thing you can get out of that experience when you open up that test book and it's on partnership tax, as long as you can get something out of that and take it with you and learn in your next thing, then it's not wasted. Don't hate it. Embrace it. You need it. You need it. So I am, again, so very pleased to know the viability and, the strength of Women's Law Students Association, Corporate Law Association, or Business Law, Black Law Students Association. I mean, those organizations sustain a population. And what they do and give and what they mean to the people who are here is immeasurable. So I am very, very grateful to be here as a proud product of this law school, which has done so much for me that I cannot thank you enough for the invitation. So thank you so much. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I hope there are questions about anything, about what I do at Aflac or anything. Yes?
Question. I'm Charles Hicks, I'm second here. I have a question about your firm. So when you were at the firm, you were the first Black person to have a firm. You mentioned that there were some partners who were very receptive and some that weren't. How did you navigate working with partners who weren't excited about an African American working with the firm? Were you nervous about getting work from them? Did you work with them? And then how that affects your advancement?
Well, I was only there for 3 years. And I was very fortunate that they put me with people that wanted to work with me in my space. But it didn't insulate me from people that I know just were not, feeling me being there. So I was around those people, but I never received work from them. I worked pretty consistently with a couple of partners who were very, very busy in my space. But even then, the firm culture, and I was talking to some of the ladies at lunch today, I hope it's evolved. I don't know. But it was a tough, tough place for anybody to be. Anybody. And there was a circle, a sister circle that was there, people that were like-minded. We were all young women, and we used to stress over telling somebody was pregnant. We wait till just about you're being wheeled into the delivery room before you even talk about it. But it just wasn't a place for people to really be different. And so what I tried to do then is what's helped me so much in my life is let my work speak for me. I put everything into the work. And I could do that. I was newly married, but my husband was in residency. So he was never home, so I could work all the time. So I just work. And as I was leaving, there were people who wanted to work with me or wanted me to work on their projects because they knew my work would be stellar. And then I got the opportunity to go to the law school, so I left. But I knew I would be leaving. I knew I wanted a life. And for those of you going to big firm, don't listen to this. It's probably totally different, probably, but check it out before you go. I knew that it would be different. So I knew I wasn't going to stay there for the long haul. And one of the things at Aflac that was I could take a deep breath when I started there, I was in the elevator with our GC at that time, Joey Loudermilk, and he was leaving. I don't know where I was going on the elevator, but he's like, I got to get out of here. My son has a basketball game. I can't be late. And I was like, really? Oh my God, like you can go to that? You can do that? Because it was unheard of. You might have gone to your kid's basketball game, but you wouldn't tell people that's where you were going. You'd be like, I'm going to go down to the courthouse and just, and then you come back later. But that's how it was in the 90s. I knew I could not sustain that. I hope it's better. I really do. I certainly don't want Aflac to be engaged with firms that have a culture like that. Yeah. Anything else? Yes.
Hi, I'm Jenna Jackson. I work in Christian Center, and it's obvious from your story that any obstacle you overcame. I wanted to know what you feel at this point in your career is your purpose, and if you feel as if your passion followed your purpose, or if your purpose followed your passion.
That's a great question. At this point in my career, what I'm really trying to do is make sure that, first of all, our legal area and all the other areas that report up to me here and in Japan, that we're set for success in terms of succession and leadership. That's my primary purpose, no question. So I'm very involved in the hiring, in the development and the mentoring of those folks, and on Japan too. Like I'm looking to see some leaders, females, sitting at the table. So I'm pushing for that. Because I personally could not have led Aflac's diversity efforts, which was in my organization for those 14 years, and sit at a table and people look nothing like me or just like me. I want to see the mixture of all things. In terms of my passion, it's really interesting. It goes back to, undergrad and then law school, even down to my Barbary horror story, that sometimes I still wake up. At night like, oh my God, it's corporate tax question. Oh my God. But I'm very motivated by what I'm interested in. If I'm interested in something, I'm all over it. I'm digging, I'm researching. Now that we have the internet, it's just easy. I'll be up all night, like Googling things. If I'm not interested, it's tough. And that's a personality flaw of mine. If I'm not interested in it, oh God, that's why my first year was so rough, because I wasn't interested in anything. But I am interested in things that I don't know about, that, like the whole diversity thing in Japan. I'm all over that. I'm all over it. I'm like, what is the country doing to support this? How can we get some assistance from the Japanese government, and some modeling? Who's done this well? Hey, we need to be meeting with these people to find out best practices. And if I'm interested, I'm all over it. If I'm not, no, not so much. So, for example, when I had the for-profit businesses, we have a for-profit printing company that was in my organization that I had to be responsible for their profitability, and a for-profit travel and events company that books all of our travel throughout the company and our 70,000 sales associates. So it's a big operation, and that reported to me. I didn't know anything about profitability, red and black and budgets. I'm not the math person, that's not me. But studying that and understanding how that corporate budget worked, what profitability really meant, not just be $5 over, but make money. I studied that, I loved that. Like that kept my juices flowing for a solid year until I could get up and, and fluent with it. So, I'm just trying to I'm not really climbing mountains anymore. I've climbed a lot of mountains in my career. I'm just trying to make things better. Just trying to make them richer and deeper and more valuable. That's really what I see my purpose as now. And there are parts of my job now, I don't, it doesn't get my juices flowing. It's my responsibility, but I'm like, okay, well, I have this today. And then there are parts that I run to it. Like I can't wait. I'm the first one in the room because I can't wait to meet about it. And it's just trying to make it better, more valuable. There's a question over here. No? Maybe somebody's scratching their head. Yes.
Thank you so much for coming today. I just have a question. What do you think that we as law students can and should strive to bring to our legal careers when we graduate, as far as just things that are valuable to you or things that you think we could do to change the dynamic?
Yeah. Well, I'm very proud of just young people, period, today. I'm proud of what's going on in like organizations and in corporate America. I'm very grateful that at Aflac our culture is just different and unique, and it's people-centered, and it's not oppressive, and it celebrates people and diversity and all of that. So we haven't had the mishaps in public, ridicule and things with a lot of bad behavior. And we've been very fortunate that that's not happened to us. But I'm proud of people coming through now who are like, no, we're not going to work like this. We won't be treated like this. We're not going to stand for this. So I love that. In the law, I think the more lawyers who are whole people and real people will be a real benefit to the profession. Because and I'll say that myself, I had to evolve to be a whole person with multiple interests and, life outside of the law. We've got to have that. We've got to have that balance, that I'm not just a lawyer, but I'm a cyclist and a father and a son and an aunt and a painter. And that's really important that we bring all of that into our places of work, because we can be pretty serious and just want to focus on this one thing, and I don't care anything else about what's going on in your life or where your interest might be. That's a horrible place to be, long term. It's not sustainable. And it won't get better unless people go and stay. And I'm guilty, because I was like, first break I get, I am out of here. And I was. But I didn't help it get better. So somebody's got to stay and invest. And work-life balance is a beast. It's especially for us, because we want to do everything exceptionally well. But is that really possible? I don't know. But anyway, back to your question. Yes, definitely be your whole authentic self when you go to practice, and don't check any of it at the door. Like whoever you are, whatever gifts and talents and defects you bring, be that, do that, whole thing. The law needs to understand how to get the best out of you with all of that. That's what I say. Yes.
My question is more so to like how you handle the level. Okay, so when we get to law school, I personally feel like Black people in particular are indoctrinated with this rhetoric of like, okay, don't make Black people feel uncomfortable, right? And so I feel like we always have to sacrifice our level of comfort for the sake of theirs. And I'm reaching a level of frustration with that, and it kind of ties into like what you were saying about being your authentic self. Mm-hmm. And I kind of want to know how you handle being yourself at the risk of making them just uncomfortable, because I personally don't care if they're uncomfortable, because I want to be my true self. But I wonder, like, at what cost, like, what the cost of that is.
Well, I'm very fortunate to be at Aflac. I'm very fortunate because we get all of you. Like we get all of you, the whole you, everything that makes you you, and that's fine. In fact, that helps us be a better company. But watch out for everybody being their whole authentic self, because everybody's going to be their authentic self. And so you can't really say, I want to be my whole authentic self, and I want everybody to accept me and be completely comfortable with me being my authentic self, when their authentic self might be like Ruthie, my roommate who had never had a conversation with a Black person. That was her authentic self. Only my housekeeper. That's it. We had to work at that thing. We had to work at some things were said sometimes in our room that I'm like, whoa, hold up. Don't say that. Don't do that. We had to work to get there. And so when we take a position, I'm not saying you're saying this because you didn't say this, but when we take a position, whoever we are or whatever our makeup is, that I am me and that's it, and everybody, whoever doesn't agree or whoever has a problem with it, well, they just have a problem. Well, the fact that they have a problem, that's their authentic self too. So how do you get to a point where your two authentic selves can coexist and everybody can have peace? That takes work. People don't want to do the work. They don't want to do the work. I mean, that's America today, if I can get off on my little soapbox. People don't want to do the work to get to the peace. I don't want to understand you. I just need you to understand that I'm, that's not how it works. It takes work. And who better to do that than lawyers who know how to get to the root of a matter and how to advocate? When I was in law school here, there's some characters in law school. I'm sure it's not now. I'm sure we're all like perfectly reasonable people. But it was some people that in my wildest dreams I would not sit down and talk to. Because I cannot even stand sitting here and listening to your questions. But the funny thing about law school is we're all in this building. Nobody going anywhere. You got to roll your sleeves up. You got to understand me. I got to understand you. And we can't afford to cut people off because they are different. We can't as people of color and women, and neither can any other category. And when we get better at that, I'm accepting you for you and where you come from and all that comes with you, but you're accepting me too. And in the middle, we're going to have an appreciation, a healthy respect for each other. That's doable, but it's work. Everybody isn't up to it. I can tell you that. It takes a lot. That's your hand, Ann. I keep seeing you just putting your hand on your chin. I thought you were raising. Oh. Any other questions? Anybody going in-house or to work for a corporation? No? Well, you're missing out because it's awesome. All right. Well, listen, it's probably time that we get out of here anyway. Yes, it is. Okay. Thank you so much for your time and for coming. Thank you.
I just have a few concluding remarks. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Carolyn Adams, and I'm the president of the Women Law Student Association. I'd like to start out just by saying thank you so much, Audrey, for being here today. It's people like you, women and women of color, who paved the way for the rest of us. And so on behalf of myself and everyone else in this room, just thank you for everything you've sacrificed and done in your life. It's been such a great pleasure getting to know Audrey and her daughter BJ and her son Wesley today. Just to meet them has been such a nice experience for I know myself, Haley, and Mandy. We have a few other thanks we need to dole out to the rest of the school because this is not a one-person show. This isn't just WILSA, it's the entire UGA law community. We'd like to say thank you to Edith House herself, who made this all possible for us. We'd like to thank the Bentons, who are always willing to lend their support to our lecture series. We're very grateful for you. We'd also like to thank Dean Rutledge, Lisa Mathis, Heidi Murphy, Lana Panner, Laura Pulliam, Sandy Letford, Kathy Dasher, and everyone here at the law school for their support. Special thanks to the Black Law Student Association for their help in advertising for this event and their show of support here today. And also thank you to the Business Law Society for their generous co-sponsorship of the reception, which is about to follow in the Rotunda. Now, if everyone will please join me again and thank you, Ms. Tillman, for joining us today.